The broadcast has started.
Well, hello, everyone. Hopefully you can see us. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend our panel discussion on the power of UX and product managers working together. I think we can provide some good insight and some good lessons that we've learned in our careers that hopefully you can apply to yours. So we're looking forward to the conversation. If you do get a minute, you have any questions anytime during the process, please pop them into the QA. We'll be monitoring that. We're here to answer your questions, so we certainly, welcome your questions. We're not just really here to follow a script. Before we get going, the one thing I want to do is I want to thank our session sponsor, OpenArc, for sponsoring this session. They are in the expo, so if you have some time between the panel conversations, please take a minute to go visit them. We appreciate their support for this effort. And with that, what I'd like to do is kind of run around the room, the virtual room, of course, and introduce everybody. So, Anna, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Love Product Camp, attended every year. I am currently a Director of Digital User Experience. The reason I'm hesitating is because I'm literally 1 week into this job. Before this, I ran the user experience design department at a model, now called 3M Model. It's a speech technology company in healthcare space. And I am also the co-chair of Interaction Design Association, IXDA, which has a local chapter right here in Pittsburgh. We run free events for people interested in interaction design and UX. That includes a lot of PMs. There are free events every month. So, please check it out if you'd like. And I'm happy to talk about this topic.
Great. Skip, I see we already have accolades on your whiteboard, so that's good to see.
Thanks, Brandon. I'm Skip Shelley. I'm Associate Teaching Professor in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, where I teach service design, digital service innovation, interaction design studio, and lecture in user-centered research and evaluation and other courses. I'm also the director of the Master of Human-Computer Interaction program, one of the first programs at a graduate level. We have over 1,000 alum. And I'm thrilled to be here with Brandon and all these brilliant designers that are going to help us understand how UXers and product managers complete each other.
Cool. Priyanka.
Hi, I'm Priyanka Shetty. I'm a product design manager at VMware. Prior to this, I worked as a design lead, and I've been in the design industry for over 10 years now. Really happy to be here and have this discussion around how product managers and UXers can work closely together.
Great. And Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm I'm a senior product manager at Digital Turbine, and came into product from working and going to the Masters of Human-Computer Interaction program as well. Was also at Deloitte as a product manager, kind of took into going from that design experience into product. So excited to talk about that interaction between the two roles and how we work.
Cool. And I'm Brandon Eckberg. I've been in software for about 1,000 years, and in a variety of different roles. I really got my education on learning the value of the product manager and UX designer relationship as I was part of sponsoring capstone projects at MHCI. And it's really where it opened my eyes, and I've been a huge proponent ever since, and I've been very involved in that product manager and UX relationship for about the last 8 or 10 years. So looking forward to this conversation. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the goal of our panel is to really talk about how product management and UX can help each other out, how they're, to kind of discuss a little bit about some of the issues, the dynamics of the roles, maybe with some of the conflicts that show up. And I think if we can do anything, if we can provide enlightenment to that interaction and help everybody that's attending understand, how that relationship works and how it can work better and what each side brings to the party, I think we'll all be better for that. I know as I learned what UX really brought to the game through the capstone projects, it greatly opened my eyes and made my job a lot easier and made me a lot better at it. So hopefully you can have a similar takeaway. So So with that, let's we have 3 core questions we're going to use to kind of keep the panel on track, and I'd like to throw the first one out. So relationships between product managers and UX designers is often misunderstood, and that misunderstanding can lead to groups or lead to each group not understanding what they bring to the party. So Leah, can you help us understand what that relationship is and how the 2 roles can work more efficiently?
Sure, of course. So for me, I think coming from that design background and going into product management, I can kind of work and see a lot of where that PM role comes in and the UX role comes in. There's a lot of similarities and differences there. At the end of the day, the similarities is what brings us together. We're kind of all on the PM and design side looking to be that user's voice, advocating for the user, looking to solve for their users' problems. So kind of really building on that and building a relationship on that, I think really helps that dynamic work well together. For example, me and my head of design, that's my go-to person at work. Whenever something's coming up or we're thinking through kind of new ideas, brainstorming, he's definitely the person that I make sure is with me and thinking through. It really helps, especially in the different stages as well, as you're going through your product cycles, early stage when you're trying to understand what problem you're solving for. Instead of thinking of the UX person as just putting the pixels together or just putting up the ideas together on a mock-up, really bringing that person into really kind of think about what is the problem we're solving for, what are the market spaces. The difference is with that role is also like the PM can bring in a lot of the components of the business side, the constraints, what other stakeholder inputs are, and work with that design team and the UX team to think through not just the market research, but also like the user research that's coming into the table. I think that's a lot of kind of that back and forth dynamic that I think is really valuable there. Also kind of in thinking through when you're coming into the role as a PM and meeting your design team, really assessing that team, and if it's just a design contractor versus new UX designer that's like coming into the role early on and still kind of doing a lot of the pixel mock-up wireframing versus a senior designer that might be able to be that partner for you. That might be able to bring in a lot of that advocating for the user's voice in your business, in your company, and bringing that up the chain. I think those are a lot of the kind of things to think about when you're coming in either from a PM role, but also understanding that design background and the design team's key like responsibilities and what they can bring to the table as well. Thinking through, I think also from like an organizational perspective, for me, for example, I really value the fact that for me, my head of design is also kind of that operations person. So they're able to bring into the team the kind of task management for the design team, and then also be able to think at that higher level, big picture. But for some PM roles, it's a little bit more where the PM is coming in to do that design work or working with the designer and doing that task management kind of thing. So really assessing kind of where your team is and understanding that can help you kind of do good for the team as a whole and the company as a whole, I think.
Yeah, I think that's some great insight. I know in my experience, the just a simple little thing that I've learned from the UX world is that simple question, tell me more about that, where you really learn to pull that insight out of a customer as opposed to just assuming you already know it. And, that's where I've just seen an incredible partnership work.
Of course, and really understanding to solve the problem together. So the UX team, if you take advantage, they're always, what we were taught in school, like ask why, ask at least 5 times. So really working with the design team and understanding that that's the perspective that they're coming from. Whereas sometimes I even notice it myself, even coming from a design background, sometimes I'm so stuck in like, this is what the stakeholders want. This is what the design or technical constraints are. But taking that step back and listening to some of the key kind of elements that they can bring to the table and the questions that they ask can really kind of bring out even better solutions than what you first started from.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anybody else in the panel want to throw in, have an idea there?
I just wanted to maybe mention a quick anecdote. So my favorite representation of like succinct description of how UX and PMs work together came from one of my favorite PMs that I worked with for years, and we share a brain, right? And those I found that were the best relationships with PMs I've ever had. And he once described our relationship to me as, "You help me guess better." And I just think it's so great. Like, first of all, it acknowledges that there's a lot of guesswork that we're all doing. As much as we like to think that, there's some science to what we do and we mitigate all the risk, like really we're guessing, we're using our expertise and our intuition, and designers are so great at this, just picking up on the little clues. And I would say your product managers out there, lean into this, help your designers help you guess better. You'll be thankful, and your designers are going to be happier too.
For sure, yeah.
I would agree. I've been amazed that just, during in my current job as a director of product management, it's almost interesting, the ability to record interactions with customers as you're gaining insight, because everybody's doing it virtually, is just, you get an incredible library of information in those recordings, and you can go back and look at them and pick out the little nuggets and things like that. It's been in some ways good, great.
Yeah, and also like thinking through what types of different questions to ask. I think the panel does the UX researcher or the designer can come up with those like creative ways, outside of the box kind of things that from the PM side, if we're too stuck on stakeholder requirements, that we might want to think through as well.
I agree. So why don't we move on to our next concept? So, often UX and PM folks can see their jobs as doing the same thing, right? Designing great products. Sometimes that can cause conflict because each group doesn't quite understand what their role is, and more importantly, they don't understand what the other person's role is. So, Anna, can you help us walk through a conversation and bring up some examples of where you've seen communications and misunderstanding of what each side does, and how that causes conflict and how we can get past them?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's normal. It's okay that our roles are overlapping to a certain degree. And I think it's actually healthy that we do use some of the same methods and sometimes overlap in our understanding and butt against each other in certain areas. So I like how Leah described our roles, right? Essentially, both PM and UX, our core mission in life is to find that sweet spot between what the user wants, what the business needs, what technologically we can deliver, right? We all, good PMs and good UX, we all believe that the answer is not in a building. We need to go and be talking to customers. We need to be out there, which is all great. But that, of course, brings up a lot of actual logistical and hairy questions as to who actually owns that customer. Does the designer need to ask the product manager every time they want to do user research? Is this, for example, who runs the feedback sessions? Who runs the demos? Right? And the honest answer is either and both. Both need to be able to do this. Both have the skill set. That said, designers are better at asking less biased questions, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more. So leaning into who can run a particular activity better, that I think is important to acknowledge who has the right skill set and who to delegate it to. If it's a sensitive customer situation, if customer is escalated, maybe this should be leaned on PM side more. That's also fine. But both parties have to be present and actively listening. Sort of a related issue to this that I hear a lot, especially from teams where UX hasn't been integrated that well. Sort of my first red flag on a team when I join is when I hear PM say, well, we're sort of going through discussions with a customer and maybe with technical teams, and we will bring design soon, I promise, like they're coming, right? But not yet, right? If you are doing this, there's a high chance that you're bringing your designers too late. Because guess what's going to happen? You're going to bring them in because you think they only need to be brought in when they are going to start churning out mockups or wireframes, right? They're going to have all that same context and all that same information that you have been gathering for, I don't know, weeks or God forbid months, right, before you brought them in. So they're going to be getting secondhand information or going to the same people you did. It's waste. We all dislike waste. So instead of creating this either poor information quality or repeat of the same activities, just bring your designers in along with the right, have them choose what they want to attend and what they don't, and what they do and what they don't want to attend. And sort of this third area that I see that I think is very easy to fix, to be honest, is just lack of common language and alignment on lingo. PMs typically come from business schools. You know, they throw around terms like ROI and conversion rate and, you know, all sorts of abbreviations that designers just like, shoo, it goes over their heads, right? And they don't want to pay attention to that. And their aim is to widen and broaden the problem rather than narrow it all down, right? So they're like, oh, my PM is going to worry about that. And to be honest, we as designers, I consider myself a designer, we need to lean into this world, and we need to know what all of this means, and we need to know why it's important, and we need to speak some of that language. But it goes both ways, right? Designers then starts throwing around terms like contextual inquiry or button affordance, and PMs are like, whoa.
I was just going to bring up contextual inquiry. That was one that got thrown at me for a long time, and I'm like, okay, what does that mean? It means I asked a question, right? You know, and
exactly.
There's a subtlety to it.
Yeah, and if somebody doesn't know, it's essentially a research method for observing your users in the wild and asking them the right questions at the right moment, so it is contextually relevant. So
SurveyMonkey will not get you contextual inquiry, right?
Yeah. So I think there's simple solutions here, right? We could learn more about each other's lingo and define the terms for each other, which would be great. Another thing we could do is simplify our terminology and just find words that make sense not just to PM and UX, but also development and sales and everybody else who is part of decision making. I'm sure all of us have gone through this process before and have found language that works on specific teams.
Yeah. Priyanka, you had a few ideas in this area. You want to weigh in?
Absolutely. So I absolutely agree with what Leia and Anna have been saying. Let's UX and PM should be partnering with each other, and they should be doing that early on. As you spoke about contextual inquiry, it reminds me of this funny story, and a very interesting story where contextual inquiry helped me when I was actually at Carnegie Mellon and doing my master's program. And the PMs or whoever were driving that product came to me saying, hey, there's this data entry problem that we have to solve. The data isn't being entered properly. So we need a form to be redesigned. But when we actually conducted contextual inquiry, that's really going into the user's context and sitting there and observing the user, we realized it wasn't the form entry tool. It was really that these people were holding a phone in one hand and trying to enter data with the other hand. So the problem was not redesigning the form. It was actually about having the right headsets and then being able to enter data. So this was an example to reinforce the fact that reinforce the fact that PMs shouldn't go to the UX with the problem that needs to be solved. Involve UX in even identifying the problem that needs to be solved, because we really have the methods and techniques that can help us do that. Instead of asking, hey, do you need this? We look at what the customers do and then figure that out. Also, on this point, I feel like PMs have a lot on their plate. Like, it's not just the research that they focus on. They actually do so many other things, like figuring out how all those cross-functional teams are going to come together to deliver this product. What is the timing of this product, and so on, talking to different customers, stakeholders. So there's really a lot of these things like research and identifying what should the solution be that they can rely on UX on. So this is where I feel they can.
I would agree with that. I know that 2 years ago, Jenna Dayton and I did a session here at the product camp, and it was all about how, if you really used UX design right, that you could make a product manager's job incredibly easier. And I was the personal example of the session, and it was a lot of fun putting that one together. So the cool thing is we're getting some good questions in, so I definitely want to try to keep us on track. So actually, Priyanka, the next one's to you. Is so you have a background in both development and design, and I think it'd be very interesting to help the group understand, how does that interaction work, and what have you seen that that what can product management do to work more effectively with UX and development, because in a lot of cases they are the bridge between those groups.
I agree. It's a very interesting question. It made me think about really how did I think when I was a developer. And one thing I realized was as developers, we tend to think a lot about how do we optimize our code? How do we make sure that we have this solid platform which can be used by different products and larger companies or different features, and then we can serve that by this one platform. But quite often we lose the sight of the user. And that's where UX comes in. So what we don't want the product to be is a reflection of what our backend architecture is. And really, in enterprise companies, often I see that the backend has its architecture, and then UX is called in to say, hey, build a nice, beautiful UI on the top. But it doesn't work that way, because if then later a competitor comes along with really thought through UX, and that's when which is more usable than a reflection of the backend architecture. So that's where, and then we'll start losing business. So really partnering with UX earlier and get the PM involving both UX and development earlier helps.
Just I would throw something out. When I look at a product and there's a page that looks like a grid that you can tell is a mirror of a database table. You can tell who's driving the design, right? That's absolutely.
Exactly.
Seen that many, many times.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other hand, when we are thinking about, when designers are thinking about designs, it's very important that for a product to get shipped, it needs to be technically feasible. So it's really empathy that needs to be across both parties. And that's where one of the tools that I feel will help the PMs is if they look at something like a service blueprint that really identifies what the user actions are, but what are the things which are going to happen in the back end as well. So this really brings the user intentions as well as whatever needs to happen in the underlying infrastructure together. So that's something that folks can certainly look into and involve both the teams early on in their.
I agree. I've certainly seen, especially on the tools side of the world, where if the UX and the development teams really align on tools, that it can be incredibly powerful for efficiency. When you can take a design, whether you're using Insight or Figma, whatever tool you're using, and the developer can actually import that into the IDE, it's an unbelievable, it's an order of magnitude improvement in efficiency.
It also really opens up the channel of communication. I find that in a lot of places, there's this thing that, okay, the PM is the middle and everything's kind of going to them. So then the designers are talking to the PM, the developers are talking to the PM, but then they're not talking to each other. We don't have to be that middle person. If you're using those tools where they can easily communicate with each other, ask questions to each other, where a PM doesn't need to be involved, for example, that really kind of opens up that channel of communication and makes that more of a seamless process. Or in terms of managing those assets, then doing design reviews together and going back and forth, not just from the designers walking it through to the devs, but then also the devs walking it through once they've developed it, and really kind of going back and forth. I think really helps that kind of team dynamic work well together. But
I would agree with that. I've had some great success where you actually, after you do the recorded sessions, hopefully you've been able to record them. I mean, even pre-COVID, when you would take the camera along and record the observations, that sitting down with the dev team and actually going through and trying to transcribe that, where you're trying to pull the little nuggets out. I mean, and having the dev team actually see that is very, very powerful. I got to throw this one in. This is going way back to my Rockwell software era. So this is late '99. And So Skip, this is Tim Scanlon, right? So he set up one of the first ever usability labs. This is when it was just starting. And it was literally a room that was designed to look like an office with a two-way mirror and the whole thing. And so we would bring customers in and they would start using products, and we'd have developers behind the two-way mirror, and the customers would start cussing out the product and saying, this sucks. And it was very interesting to see the developers' faces as they saw their product attempt to get used. So, very enlightening.
Yeah, and I think we no longer have an excuse not to do this. To be honest, the tools have grown so much. There's every tool has support for designer developer collaboration. I always tell my teams that as designer, developers are your first users. They're the first ones that are going to consume your design, and if it's not ready to be implemented and it's not set up in such a way that it maps the developer's language, you're not having enough empathy for your developers.
All right, now my dog's going to start barking in a second. So he's got his head's perked up here. So
he got bored already. I was just going to add with what Anna was saying about bringing designers in early on. I've really been able to utilize that for accessibility, for example. A lot of companies and a lot of businesses think about something like that after the fact, and either when they're being sued or when it's not being, going through and fixing. And at that point, it's a very big cost for the company. You have to go back through, redevelop it, figure out the problems, or a lot of the times accessibility is looked at the end just for testing. And I found that bringing that in from the design all the way through the process of product really helps. Then by the time we're getting to the testing part, we're already pretty much good to go. We've thought about it from the design, from the colors, from the layout, the hierarchy of the layout and things like that. So then it's also easier for the developer. They don't have to guess which colors should we be using, what layout or what structure do we need. They already have that kind of layout done for them. And that just makes it less of an effort for everybody and less of a cost and things like that too.
Yeah. I was at my last job. The development and the UX team actually created a common set of objects in both the design and the development system. So when you pulled them over, they came in styled and colored and everything, and unbelievable efficiency. So, hey, we only have a few minutes, so we're kind of up on that edge here. We've got some great questions here. I'd love to throw some of them out to the team. So Zach asked a really good question. He says, how does this sort of communication and role responsibility that we're discussing here work in a much smaller company where maybe you don't have a UX team and you don't have a product management team, and you've got 10, 15, 20 people and people are wearing multiple hats? How do we see that working? Anyone want to take that one?
I can start. So I work at a small business, and it's just a handful of us. So that's when that kind of, like you said, multiple hats element comes in. And at least for me, when I'm working with like the design side, for example, if my designer's overloaded already with a lot of their work, I'm trying to help in. I will come in, work in Figma, work in Sketch, try to kind of help out the team in terms of like building mock-ups and things like that. Or on the other side, taking it to the developer, really kind of, Figma is a great tool, for example, helped be the kind of ambassador of Figma from the product side, so that when I'm walking it through with the devs, really kind of being like, oh, if you have a question, put a comment in here, put something in here. So it's a lot easier for everybody to work together. But also when you're wearing those multiple hats, if everything's kind of documented somewhere together, that helps everybody be able to pick up where someone else left off, or be able to help out if needed at a certain time.
Great answer. And I'm in a very small company for the first time in a long time, and I see that same thing where we're all sharing. I've seen developers jump in and use Figma and do prototypes, and then they'll hand them to me and I'll go present them to a customer. So where everybody's sharing things works really well.
Yeah, I tend to think that smallness is actually an asset. We often think of greater business value coming from larger organizations, but I would argue that the smallness of an organization allows for very frequent, intimate experiences across disciplines, and allows for those to be shared, and allows for the successes and the failures to be shared as well. And that tends to build a kind of relationship and trust, in particular between the role of UXers and product managers, that often you can't find in larger organizations, not because they don't care about these things, but there's just something about scaling human systems. 10, 15, 50 of us seem to work better than, 10,000, 100,000, 200,000.
Yeah. Well, it's that magic, the magic team number that Agile throws, the 8, that you want a Scrum team to be 8 people, a couple developers, a test engineer, a product owner, UX person, and that's it. And that does. I can tell you, I'm in a 25-person company now, and we have retooled a huge portion. I'm going to venture a guess about 30% of our UI, and it's been a 2-month process. And no place have I ever been have I seen a team come together and do that level of change that quickly. It's been really cool. It's been a lot of fun.
Yep.
I think tools play a huge role here. I would highly advise, don't divide your tooling into, this is a designer tooling and this is the PM tooling and this is developer tooling. Like Leah was saying, right? I had product managers making wonderful mock-ups for in Balsamiq. Just throw your idea out there. I'm going to finalize it, but get it out of your head, right? It's such a good visualization tool. Do that. But also designers are pretty good at staying organized and figuring out a schedule. So I've had a design researcher last year who successfully ran a pilot for a brand new product in a completely unknown space, but there was no PM that we could put there, and she just ran everything from start to the end, and it was incredible. So you utilize the skills. Think about skills more than you think about roles.
Yeah, so here's an interesting little question. It's similar to what we've been talking about that Alina raises. She says sometimes UX works through a product manager lens, meaning, and what she means by that is that the information is kind of filtered to the UX team by product management, product owner, and then they go out. The UX team winds up doing that kind of working under a preconceived notion, right, where maybe something was missed. And so Alina asks, what should UX do in that scenario?
I could take that. So, yeah. And what Alina describes is something that happens quite often, actually. So in that situation, what we could do is sometimes just because of the time pressure and so on, we could maybe start with those as assumptions, but as quickly as possible, go into the industry, test that with the users. So the sooner we get our users' voice in, the sooner we can challenge those requirements if needed. Or sometimes we might actually find that they align with whatever we are getting as requirements aligns with what the users need, in which case we can continue working on that project with early testing and really jumping in, figuring out some options and going to the users sooner has helped in the past.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, David asks a similar question. It's a little more related about organization. And Skip, you might want to take this one. David says he's worked in organizations where product ownership, product management, and design are separate reporting structures, and that's caused problems. I imagine with some of the clients you've worked with, big and small, that you have an opinion on organizational structure that optimizes this relationship?
Yeah, it feels to me like, there's a trade-off here. The responsibilities that are clearly distinguished between product management and design make for accountability to be very easy to understand, but oftentimes the trade-off is that the product management group is pointing a finger at the design group while the design group is pointing a finger back. And so at some point, you have to have a shared responsibility for the success of the project. If it's not happening at the lower echelons of the authority model, then it needs to happen at the higher end of the authority model. Somebody ultimately has to be accountable for this. It's often referred to as one throat to choke.
Yeah.
It is, give me one person who's saying that I'll be responsible for the success of the product. And I think that's probably more important than how our roles are defined at the end. And having that person universally recognized throughout the organization can really liberate others to do their work. And if that person's, whether it's a designer or a product manager, is running that role the right way, they will invite disagreement. They will want criticism because they'd rather get it from inside the organization first than from customers after releasing something that isn't quite serving.
Yeah.
I agree about that one goal. And in fact, I mean, I've been in organizations where these have been different um, reporting chains, but in the end, the product has to sell. The product needs to be useful. So the way we operate is the team comes together to deliver that product, and then we can have quads which are cross-functional. So even if their reporting structures are different, they are working towards this one goal that Skip was talking about.
So I'll just throw it. There's I don't know, people, I assume a lot of people on this session follow Pendo. Not that I'm putting a plug in for them because they're not our sponsor, but they got a great product and they have a great blog. And they put out a report each year about where does product management fit in organizations, and they do a whole survey, Europe, and compare different things. And it's fascinating to see that product management UX researcher kind of role becoming, kind of moving more into the, I hate the term C-suite, but getting more visibility at the top levels of companies. And I think as technology has become more complicated, the ease of use is so critical in a successful product. That's good to see. So I highly recommend following that. We just have a couple minutes left. So Danny here has asked a really interesting question that I really don't have any idea. I'd love to throw to the team. Danny says, I'm curious to know to understand how you see behavioral scientists and insights from this field fitting in with product teams, especially the overlap with UX and HCD. Since I'm not sure what HCD means, but
I can take that one. So okay. I think at least from my experience, we've been bringing a lot of our behavior scientists and our data scientists into the process from the get-go also. When I started at the company I'm at right now, one of the bigger pain points I've heard is a lot of the times people think about the data at the end of the fact, and no one ever brings a data team in until a dashboard needs to be made. And by the time that's the case, they don't have the data they need to even pull out the insights that we need. So when we're thinking through like feature development and the experience and the flows, bringing in that behavior scientist or that data scientist in early so that they can also think through like, what are we looking for? What are the information we need from this new feature, from this new product we're building out, so that we can incorporate that from the process from the get-go, I think is really important. As a whole, it's what Priyanka was saying, like at the end of the day, we're all on one team. A lot of the times when we're sitting in different departments and reporting to different structures, we start wanting this and that, and we think about it as like our own needs. But at the end of the day, you're coming together to build something for your customer, for your user. So you have to bring it back together. Like, how can we help each other? And what you were saying, Brendan, like now more and more, like the design teams are being brought in together with the product team. Like design and product is reporting up to the product head or design head or something like that. So really kind of bringing that collaboration together, I think, is important.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it work, big and small.
I think one way to reflect make sure that all of these needs are reflected is really work through your definition of done and make sure that the needs of every one of these disciplines, the behavioral science, the UX, the product management, the business feed, the technical feasibility, all of that is worked into your definition of done. It's hard work, but if you don't do that right from upfront, you're going to be accruing debt and you're going to be reworking things later. It's hard.
Cool. Well, we're down just to the last couple minutes. Does anybody from the panel? We're out of questions. So I first want to thank all the attendees for listening and also providing some great questions. We appreciate that. We look forward to maybe next year doing this interactive, or face to face. Hopefully, we're at that stage. Does anybody doesn't have any more questions? I don't know. Does anybody from the panel want to throw any last thoughts out?
I wanted to respond to Danny Grodsky's comment about behavioral science and insights. There are really four roles that have been emerging in the past 10 or 15 years, and the market has an apparent insatiable appetite for these roles. One is design. It was documented quite well by John Maida when he started at Kleiner Perkins. shortly after the release of the iPhone. The other is product management, and the others are data scientists and behavioral scientists. The real source of value in the future is for these 4 roles to work together to figure out what problem we should be solving. And I would argue that the proper place for a behavioral scientist is generating genuinely insightful insights, not just bringing facts back from the field, right? The user likes to eat chocolate chip cookies on Monday morning. We need to understand why. We need to understand how that changes our thinking about the product. The other thing I would argue is that the behavioral scientist is, to my mind, starting to merge with the data scientist, because we're starting to instrument digital services and products as a matter of standard practice now. It's not an exotic thing to collect data about the usage of an application and use that data to inform how to invest in future improvements of the product or the service, or to kill it because it's a zombie and you need to shift that investment somewhere else. So I see these 4 roles as coming together, and in the future, and if you just look at the salaries and the number of open positions that these 4 roles are commanding, to the extent that the market is an indicator about what's important, I think you would agree that these 4 roles are really important. We need to start working together more.
Yeah, I agree. I have, in my career, especially like I said, in the last 10 years when I kicked this off, I've just seen an incredible change in how things work and the quality of products that we've been able to bring to market, the usability of the products, the acceptance of the products when you launch them. I mean, everything you want from a product. The collaboration of the right brain and the left brain group is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So I agree. Well, I'd like to thank first up the panel. I appreciate your time. It's been wonderful working with you guys. I look forward to doing it again in the near future. Whatever we can do, I'm sure, Skip, you can bring us together. It will help you teach a class or something.
Of course.
And to everybody, all the session attendees, thank you for your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this wonderful product bootcamp. All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.